welcome to Tech Bites, and thank you for joining. I want to kind of start the conversation a little bit. This is AWS Specialist Tech Bites, and you are a specialist. And rather than asking, what do you do at AWS? I'd like to ask you, what do you specialize in as a specialist at AWS?
Yeah, so my specialty is security. I've been doing all things security for well over 15 years now, probably closer to 20. I've built my specialty, I guess, within my specialty is I'm really good at ambiguity and building programs. So I've built security programs in healthcare, manufacturing, and now, top 3 global AWS programs. So
nice. And you said, and you're part of the prototype, one of the prototyping teams at AWS. How long have you been at AWS, and has it always been in prototyping?
Yeah. So I did join the prototyping team. I've been here almost 5 years in March. And we just went through a rebranding. So we're now I believe it's the Amazon Specialist and Partner prototyping team. So we were formerly under our Worldwide Specialist Organization. Well, we still are. That was our team name. Now we're just ASP.
Yeah, you kind of get used to that here.
Yes.
Names change, leadership change, and some things change. But change is good, and it, like we say at AWS, it's always a day one. So I always, when those changes happen, I kind of embrace them because I'm like, okay, it's day one. Let's do this again.
Exactly.
Like, let's go. Yeah. And we just went through that here a little bit at AWS. So that's exciting. So you're a specialist on the prototyping team. I kind of want to talk a little bit about like prototyping and distinguish, for folks who might not know. I mean, I'm, as a former developer, I'm familiar with prototyping. In fact, I kind of feel like every code I write is a prototype until proven otherwise. But certainly, prototypes. How do we distinguish prototypes at AWS? Like, what is a prototype?
Well, and even within AWS, there's a distinction. So for our group, we use capital P and little p prototyping to help differentiate that. So, a lot of people group like demos, proof of concepts, prototypes kind of in the same little bucket. And for us within the prototyping programs, because there's actually multiple teams, it's very niche, but very important distinctions between each of those items, and then obviously solutions and fuller products. So we define a prototype as a functional but non-production ready asset. So when we do prototyping with our customers, it's not what I would call hand-wavium or magic, where it's like, yeah, it totally works, but then if you dig into it, it doesn't really work. Now, what we build and deliver to customers is fully functional. A lot of our customers are like, oh, so I can just put this into production? And we're like, no. There's some caveats, and there's some additional work that you need to do, but it is functional. It does what it says it's supposed to do, and it's built based on a production quality preference. And when we get to the big P versus little p, prototyping in AWS, we actually have a formalized program around prototyping where we have very much explicit operating practices. We have approvals because some of what we do kind of is in a gray area when we work with customers. And so we make sure that we work with our legal, with our internal security teams, as well as our business leaders and obviously the customers, to make sure that what we do is earning and maintaining that trust with our customers while we find those innovative solutions that don't just solve today's problem, but typically enable them to scale to meet their future needs as well.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. Like, I think about this, like when you think, having done software for a number of years and worked with a variety of clients, is like typically a part of that conversation is some assurances that this thing is going to do what it says it's going to do, and it's going to do it in the way that you say it's going to do it, and it's going to do it at this capacity. And so you try to like add those assurances into the scope of work that you're developing. But maybe in a prototype, those assurances start to go away, but you still have to have maybe a real conversation with your customer about what is being provided, maybe what is not being provided. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Within the prototyping world, I liked what you said about it's functional. It's not hand wavium, because I've seen the whole variety in software. There's vapor. We talk a lot about vaporware. Like,
Yeah.
you sell the idea, and then you give me the money, and I'll go build it because I know I can go build it. But or there is this like point and click. Like it's a what do they call that?
Like a wireframe or
Wireframe, a click-through wireframe that looks like it would, but it's not really. That's not what we're talking. We're actually talking about real software. It does something real, but maybe it's not, well architected or to the completest degree that it doesn't follow all the well architected pillars.
Yeah.
But it could. It just needs that little extra bit of attention. One of those pillars is security.
Yep.
Help me figure out. Because I can tell you as a developer, one of my challenges has always been like security for me personally sometimes it becomes an afterthought.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, I got to get the thing to work before I can worry about securing it. I'll star privilege everything so I know that it works. And I know there's a lot of builders out there who get into that habit as well. So help me understand, like, when we're talking about a prototype, we're just trying to get something to work. When does security become a part of that conversation?
Well, so I'm going to stand on my soapbox because I definitely have, I think, hopefully an experienced perspective on this. And really what it comes down to is that security is either a byproduct or a necessary stopgap measure for quality. And so what I like to say is that security is just the mechanism that helps companies show you where your baby is ugly. Because ultimately, when you think about it, every security vulnerability that exists is because something wasn't built right.
Sure.
Now, whether that was because we needed to get a product to production faster, and so we didn't implement all of the features and functionalities that we should have, which leads to potential risks, or it was an unknown, and technology has progressed to the point where, hey, now there's a way to compromise this thing, which we commonly know as 0 days. So there's really 3 truths and a lie to security that I practice when I look at how do we implement security. The first is that security, by and large, is a logical fallacy because it presupposes that the bad guys are the root cause of the problem.
Really?
And really, the root cause of the problem is that security is the last bastion of the imperfect, and we focus on solving the symptoms of the root cause, but not the root cause, which is actually not building the right thing at the right time in the right way, which ultimately means it's always a good time to be in a security position, just for all the wrong reasons, which leads to kind of the lie, which is that security impedes the ability for the business to actually do things. And the reality is that the adage is that, security impedes the ability for the business to realize value. And it's kind of like a credit card where are you choosing to save up the cash by doing the work and creating a quality product, or are you just going to charge that technical debt and try and pay it off at a later point in time where the interest ultimately becomes that risk that you're assuming nobody calls your debt in, and now you're like, oh crap, we're stuck and we've got this problem. So when I talk to our internal teams and customers, the question is, what are you doing from a security standpoint to help people build a better quality product? Because if we can ensure things are being built in a quality fashion, guess what? They're not as vulnerable, because we can't say not vulnerable because there's always 0 days and people are really smart, and sometimes bad people do bad things, and we can't prevent that. But we can at least ensure to the best of our abilities that they don't have an easy way in. So that's the big thing. When it comes to prototyping, we do have kind of this, we have the shared responsibility model at AWS, but we also have to kind of look at it from a shared production path model. And what I mean by that is that, for example, we don't implement login and monitoring as a part of our prototype because our prototypes are time bound. We typically work with customers from between 2 to 6 weeks on development. That's all the time we've got. And while, yes, login and monitoring is critical, most customers already have login and monitoring practices in their company. And since we don't deal with production data, we don't deal with sensitive data or protected data, we don't really want to integrate into those systems at the point of building a prototype. And that's
those are some of those trade-offs and prototypes. Like, that that's a thing, and you probably have your way of doing it, but we don't need to focus our time because, by definition, rapid prototyping. I always thought that was a little redundant. Like, all prototypes should be rapid. Like, if you're taking a long time to create a prototype, maybe you're, at least in the software world, maybe you're doing it wrong. But So that's part of that trade-off is like, hey, we know login monitoring is a thing, but we don't necessarily 100%. Need to do it as part of this. Got it.
And so we've got some of that login and monitoring, resiliency, backups. We do some encryption, but again, it's service level encryption. And if that works for the customer, great, it's built in. But
not bring your own keys. We're not going to set up this whole complicated rotation for your own keys, right?
That complicates our ability to deliver a product in a rapid state, and you then still have to make it work within your environment. And we try and make it as simple as possible to take our prototype and put it into production. But we also want to focus on where it matters, which is solving the customer's innovative business challenge. And that's another unique aspect. We don't do innovation tourism on our team. We focus on making sure that what we're building solves an immediate business need and that the business has the executive support to take that to production. So
innovation tourism, it's the first time I've ever heard that term. What do you mean by innovation tourism?
Yeah, so to give you an example, we worked with a aviation customer to build a prototype where we were able to leverage AWS to help them manage their fleet of updates for the seatback entertainment. Prior to the prototype, they were literally FedExing or UPSing SD cards around the world, so that when a plane arrived at an airport, an employee would take that SD card, plug it into the airplane to update the movies, TVs, and other content, which is a logistical nightmare. The prototype ended up using AWS and IoT to manage that at a fleet-wide scale. But what happened next was they came back and said, oh, hey, we have this really cool idea for this other prototype. And it sounded really interesting until we got to the point where we're like, well, who's the executive business sponsor for this? Do you have the internal support for taking this to production? And the individual was like, well, no, I need to build this so that I can go get that approval and support. And, we can take it forward. And it's like, no, as much as we love the idea, you don't have that business support and immediate execution that we're looking for large P prototyping programs versus, say, I got to think of which ones we can talk about because they're public references, because we've got a couple that are coming out that are super cool. We worked with a healthcare company to build an agentic process for reviewing healthcare documents for quality and risk, which helps ensure that their patients who are seeking this treatment are getting the appropriate care that they need, but also that the companies providing that care are meeting all of the regulatory obligations.
Yeah, it
That
seems like a very
those.
healthcare kind of thing
Yes,
to do.
exactly, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so with that one, it was, they have this immediate need, and we were able to take it. They've got it moving into production today, but it's also now enabling them to scale into other aspects of their business, and it's become a real enabler for them to impact all
Really?
aspects of their clients' business practices. So, kind of
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
or two
When
sides.
we talk, so when we're talking about security with that, I mean, some of the things, something you said earlier that made me think about like security as a strategy, not as an afterthought. Like
Yep.
it's a at Amazon or AWS, we always say security is job zero. So that's we think about it is foundational. It's a part of everything that we do. And I hear that's what you're kind of saying as like we know that there are these things that we can implement. We're going to leave those doors open for potential, but we got to focus on functionality and make those trade offs. But we're thinking about that ahead of time, so that
Yeah.
security is still job zero. It's just maybe not the focus of this rapid iteration. But how then do we start to strategize security in prototyping? Like, what aspects do we consider when we're building this a functional prototype?
Yeah, again, it comes back to the quality conversation. So I would come back to
Really?
what you said around, we don't focus on security for prototyping, and I would argue that we do, in fact, focus on
It's just going to
security.
be a different
It's just
conversation.
it's a different approach. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Coupled to quality.
Exactly. So instead of having a rigid review process that takes, days, weeks, months to get through, where you have to do all of this gargantuan effort that impedes your ability to go to production, we focus on how do we make sure that as a prototyping engineer, you're building based on that security as a strategy approach, so that when you get to the point of where you do a security review, because all of our prototypes do go through a security review, so we still have that check. They still have to do their security scans. They still have to do a security matrix, which is kind of I call it a functional and actually useful threat modeling exercise. And so we're still doing that, but it becomes a much smaller lift because they're building with quality from the get-go. And that enables them to ensure that when they get to the scanning, they don't have hundreds of findings
Remediations.
and
Yeah, yeah.
remediations that they have to go back to implement, because they've already been doing that. They've already implemented input validation. They're already building encryption or authentication and authorization into their prototype, because it's just an ingrained part of how we do business, and how we help our customers achieve that same execution without adding security as a separate layer. And I think that's where, really, from a security practitioner standpoint, to all my security folks that are on the call, that's how you start to win friends in the business. Is
Yeah.
you don't talk security, you talk quality. Because every engineer, if I tell you your baby's ugly, or hey, you built a product that it has problems,
Right.
your immediate response is, no, it's not. I love my product. What are you talking about?
Yeah, what are you talking about?
How have I messed up? And you're more likely to say, okay, well, if I say, hey, you did a poor job at dealing with the inputs, which could crash your database, what's your immediate response to that as a
Right.
developer? Yeah, if I told you, hey, Todd, guess what? We found that a user can delete your database table.
Oh, I mean, if you told me that, I'd be embarrassed first. I'd be like, if that is possible based on code that I written, that's embarrassing. And
Right?
I would maybe
And then I'm like, hey,
second guess my.
Todd. Well, and then I was like, hey, Todd, guess what? Here's a quick and easy way that you can help make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, if you gave me an immediate answer, yeah, I would think it would mostly, I'd probably get defensive and I'd be like,
Yeah.
well, I was gonna, I was getting that, I was gonna do that, I couldn't do that. I'd probably if I'm being honest, probably be a little bit defensive. But if you said, "Hey, I solved that problem for you. You just
Yeah,
do this, and if you do this," I'd be like, "Oh, okay, sweet." Like I would
yeah,
be immediately relieved.
yeah. And guess what? We just solved the security problem, but we
Yeah.
didn't use the word security at all.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's how you start winning friends, is you don't use security. You talk the language of the developer, which is, hey, you built something that isn't built well. Let me help you build it well. And guess what? Now you don't have to talk to me as a security professional. We're
Oh,
just
yeah,
making
that's
sure
interesting.
you just built a good quality product. I'm your kind of quality control validator.
Yeah.
And if everything works, you're good to go to production.
Yeah, that's a good. I like that a lot. It kind of flips the conversation, it changes the conversation, which is prevents that defensiveness and those issues. And you really just want to make good functional software. So at AWS, is there like we like to build frameworks and mechanisms at AWS because these things
Yeah.
need to be repeatable and scalable, and we're all operating insanely fast these days. So,
Yes.
is there like, how do you start to mechanize this so that we make sure that we're not sacrificing quality but still moving at that speed and at the scale that you would expect from
Yeah.
an AWS prototyping team?
Well, and that's been kind of the journey that I've been on. So when I first started 5 years ago, we had zero security processes inside of prototyping. And so I built a prototyping security program that instantiated that security review process. And it was terrible. I'll admit it, because that's where you start. It was spreadsheets and manual tickets, and everything was everywhere. And so over the time, we've been working to consolidate, to automate a lot of that. And so right now, what we've been working on my team and that I've built is what I'm calling the Spark tool, which is security patterns, architecture review, and knowledge. And so we're leveraging, since a lot of our internal staff are now moving to more agentic IDEs like Kiro. You
Yeah.
now have the capacity to leverage what's called a Model Context Protocol server, or MCP server, which extends the functionality and tools that a agentic IDE has available to it. And so this Spark MCP server is now a tool that integrates into the developer's environment. So there's not an additional thing that you have to go and run. It's in line with your conversation with the agentic IDE. So you can go, hey, create the solutions guidance documentation for this project, or create the artifacts for this document, and it'll go through and it'll create an architecture diagram for you. It'll
Nice.
go through and calculate the monthly costs for the code. It will go through and do a well-architected framework review, and tell you, hey, here's where you are now. Here's where you need to go for production. So when we talk with customers, now we can be like, okay, here's the prototype. Here's some things you should take into consideration as you go from here to production up here. And then we do security scanning. So we're doing static code analysis. We are doing infrastructure as code linting. We're doing threat modeling, and all of that is output to the project. And now the developer can look at that and they can run it multiple times. It could be a part of their build process if they want. And that enables them to iteratively improve their processes and communicate back to their stakeholders, our customers, to be able to then more easily, quickly, and efficiently build that. And then, what we've got today is creating all of that stuff. But for me, as the security reviewer for our product team, I would still have to go through all those artifacts. So the
Yeah.
next phase, which hasn't been built yet, but it's going to be a multi-agentic security review agent that can actually do that initial cognitive analysis of those generated assets, and then provide that feedback as an additional layer of feedback, again, within the context of the IDE, so the developer's not going anywhere outside of their natural habitat. And then when it comes to me, it's like, okay, yeah, everything's check, 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 check. Looks good. From a human in the loop perspective,
Right.
you're good to go.
Yeah, I like the way this conversation's kind of evolving, because it's like, here's the kind of the philosophy and thinking behind security and prototyping and what we do for customers now there. But there's a really practical part of this conversation too, which is, what are the tools that we're using to make sure that our code is built with quality in mind and security in mind. And I've sort of avoided agentic or AI as a topic of conversation up until this point. But not because I don't think it's something we shouldn't talk about, but just because I didn't want to come out of the gate talking about it. I wanted to have that background, that context first. But certainly I've grown to love the tooling that's becoming available. And you talked about MCP as a mechanism to get context or to get access to tooling that can enable the agent to do more things as you're writing code. And you talked about Spark.
Yeah.
Maybe describe a little bit. I want to get technical. I want to get deep on this. So
sure. Let's go.
My IDE set up.
Yeah.
And for me, that is Kiro, not just because I'm an Amazonian or work at AWS, because it's amazing. Like the things, Kiro CLI, I've lived in the CLI for the last couple of days. It's awesome.
For sure.
Setting up multi-agent systems, all with their own context, their own knowledge bases.
Yeah.
I'm fully steeped in context engineering right now, trying to figure out, okay, how do I really want this to map out? But I can certainly see security and the tooling around security operating at this maybe higher plane of my context, because it certainly should be baked into everything that is an output of these agents. So you're saying you have an MCP, you've developed an MCP server, or you've maybe develop some context. I know, I see a popular framework mechanism happening right now where instead of providing these fully indexed sources or fully or MCP tools, you just sort of have context on demand through, I think Claude has skills. Kiro has something very similar where you have these skills that you can sort of write out in a markdown file, and it gives the agent some context when it's needed, and it just sort of looks through that. But maybe we can talk about and show, if you have something to show, what you've actually built.
Yeah, sure. And while I bring up the screen, really it's a traditional MCP server. So what you're alluding to is things like the Kiro powers that are kind of an extension of MCP servers where it kind of built. So it's more integrated into those platforms. And this one's more, as of right now, a traditional MCP server.
Okay, so are you writing this locally on your machine, or is this hosted somewhere?
Okay, so taking a step back, the architecture of the MCP server, the majority of it is actually running in AWS. The first iteration I built locally, it was okay. But really, to take advantage of the multi-agentic functionality, large language models, unfortunately, my MacBook is not the powerhouse to be able to run foundational models.
Even looking at the studios, though, or people who are using RBACs to wire them in parallel, run like billion parameter, 100 billion parameter models locally. I so want to do that, but I can't justify to my wife yet buying a $10,000 computer, much less multiple $10,000 computers. So for now, I'm still going to use AWS.
Exactly. And that's the value that I've built into this, is that now everything is CDK managed. So to install this, it's literally, I use Make, which is similar to like an npm run build. It's just a scripting framework. It's literally Make init. And as long as you have done your internal AWS authentication and you have valid AWS credentials, you just sit back and relax until everything's installed and configured. And then once that's done, which I've already done previously, it's as easy as saying, create or better yet, let's do this. Using Yeah,
So
go
when you
ahead.
type that up, so you've created, I just want to confirm something. You created an MCP server. You have that MCP
Yeah,
server. It's leveraging services in the cloud, obviously, to get access to the language models that are going to help develop some of these things. So there's actually a language model sitting behind the tool within the
yeah,
MCP server. You've registered that MCP server with your Kiro
hero.
IDE.
Yeah.
Now you're going to tell your agent to, hey, go do something and use the tools available to you.
Yep. So, yeah, exactly. So the MCP server is running fast MCP server, which is what's running locally on my machine. And
Nice.
inside of the MCP server, I've registered several tools, which make calls out to an API gateway endpoint, which then passes the context of this, because one of the things that you need to do is you need to have the project code. And
Right.
without installing a bidirectional connection from your local machine to AWS so that those agents could query back, we actually do an analysis of the architecture locally. So we're actually creating a knowledge base, and we're looking at things like, okay, what AWS services are you using?
Okay.
How are those connected? What are the underlying AWS services? So, for example, if you're launching an AC2 instance, well, what's your VPC? What's your region? What's your subnets? So the knowledge base is effectively building a representation of your code base,
Right.
taking that with your code, zipping it up, and passing it to an S3 bucket inside of your account.
Okay, got it. So are you saying you're creating a local index, a local knowledge
Yep,
base that indexes your code,
yep,
and that just sort of gives you some semantic meaning of the code,
sure.
and then you're taking that, the snapshot of that those semantics and uploading it to S3,
Yep, along with the code
and
itself.
along with the code itself.
Yep.
And now the tooling, does the tooling have access to that analysis as it operates in your account? Okay.
Yep. So the way that it works is all of that information and that request goes to the Lambda handler on the API gateway, and it says, oh, okay, I've got this context, which would be the code and the knowledge base. Let me store that in S3. And then inside of the design, I have an orchestration agent and some DynamoDB tables that will track all of this context as a part of a job ID. And so now, as it parallelizes the different workflows, so architecture is a individual agent, security scans an individual agent, the cost estimates an individual agent, and the security scanning is an individual agent. They themselves also have access to all the context that were uploaded. Plus, because these are Strands agents running on AWS Bedrock Agent Core, I'm using the agent gateway to actually provide additional MCP servers. So there's actually MCP servers running in my AWS account that these agents have access to take additional action. So, for example, the pricing agent uses the AWS pricing MCP server because it's actually really, really awesome. Same thing with the WAF review. It uses AWS's.
Is that part of the AWS Labs?
It is.
Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
100% encourage everybody who wants to know what your pricing will be. Go use that MCP server. It's awesome.
And the AWS Labs MCP server is really great, and it's curated and it's well documented and it's available on GitHub right now. And I know I've actually contributed to that repository to do this sort of the same thing that what you're suggesting. Actually, a very similar thing to what you're suggesting, which is like, how do we get a static code analysis index so that you can then do some research and ask some questions of that. And how do you do that from any GitHub repository that may be publicly available? I worked with somebody here on the team to build a tool for that lab. So that's a very cool thing. But Allison, what you're talking about is a perfect example of what I think a lot of builders are going to be doing today with these tools. I think the tooling is now settled, but now how do we effectively use those tools? I mean, obviously, there's going to be more tooling. We're always announcing new services, new features, and capabilities with that. That's never going to stop at AWS. We're always building. But but how do we start to really effectively use them? And I think what you just described is a great example of context engineering, right? You have tools, maybe there are tools that are MCP tools that are hosted in your account through Agent Core Gateway, or maybe there are tools that are running locally in your account. Maybe that's the code isn't locally, but the LLMs so how are you orchestrating all of these things, especially when you get into multi-agent orchestration? You have to do a little level of context engineering in order for 100%. It to run efficiently.
Yep. And that's where you can use things like, if you're using Agent Core, we've integrated memory into that, both short-term and long-term, so that you can maintain a lot of that context.
Where you left off, yeah.
Yep, exactly. And so you can also leverage whether you want to use DynamoDB tables to track kind of execution history or the outputs from the models, so that it can come back and say, oh, okay, I already did that step. I don't have to waste tokens because here's the output. The other part of that is you can leverage a knowledge base. So if you want to have a RAG type database, you can store full conversations and their histories, or a summary of those as entries in your RAG knowledge base, and agents can go and query and say, have I seen this issue before? And what were the parameters about this? And bring that context in so that you're spending less time, less tokens, and potentially helping get to a better outcome, which becomes more of a, I won't call it reinforcement learning, because it's still contextually bound to that conversation, but it does become a point where you could do some post-execution analysis to say, what are the most common topics that people are asking about? And then maybe that clues in, hey, you've got a quality problem with input validation, or hey, maybe this part of our product suite doesn't have good documentation, or hey, maybe there's a feature that we need to build because people keep asking, how do they do X, Y, or Z? And guess what? It doesn't exist yet.
Or maybe there's a developer on your team who continuously keeps forgetting to do something. and
it's either a good or a bad idea, right?
These are the really cool, fascinating productivity gains that we start to see with agentic development. I mean, they're what used to take a team of people to do. I mean, I've been through those reviews and I've been through those things. We can now start to get really efficient and accurate. And I dare say, I don't like to use the word deterministic, because I think that has a lot of implications and a lot of in a different meanings for different people. But it gets, we're just getting more accurate, and it's getting, the result is getting better and more like you would expect. And I'm always fascinated about where those efficiencies are actually gained, or the accuracy is actually gained. I mean, for a long time, I heard people talking about like optimizing RAG, right? Like, so we wanted to make sure we're chunking and we're retrieving at this most optimal level. But then now we have all these other context tools available to us: memory, knowledge bases, or powers, Kiro powers. Like, so where do you spend your time kind of do that? And it kind of makes you think, what did you learn in building this? Like, so you built this, you've got all these different things. Is there something that was kind of surprising or that you learned that was like, hey, people should know?
Yeah, I think
don't do this.
Well, one, I think there's a couple lessons learned. First and foremost, I'm not a developer. I am very much a business person that got put into a security position because I'm a nerd and I can understand technology. So if you hear me speak, you're like, hey, this person's really smart. I bet they build a lot of really cool stuff. No, it's why I love Kiro, because now, after all the decades of thinking about all these really cool ideas, I have something that can actually help bridge my gap of knowledge and skills of putting ideas to keyboard and reality. But that being said, I think one of the gotchas, and I'll talk about some like the lowlights before we get into some of the highlights of this, is that there's no silver bullet. And one thing that I think a lot of people have done, and it's not just specific with generative AI or agentic-based coding, they look to these new innovative patterns, whether we're talking Gen AI today or cloud a decade ago, or virtualization decades and decades ago. They look at it as it's magic. And magic presupposes that with a fancy catchphrase or, a click of my fingers, something amazing happens. And there's no effort or there's no work involved to making that happen. It just happens. And the reality is that's not the truth. It is magical. These things are magical, but magical things take an incredible amount of time, effort, and expertise to actually make the magical thing look like magic. And so when we're looking at how do we leverage generative AI, you look at, okay, well, how do you do context engineering? We would call that, in the initial days, system prompt engineering. How do you create prompt engineering? How do you prevent people from breaking your prompt engineering or context engineering today? How do you ensure that your agent that you're now wanting to take actions for you are A, only taking the actions you want them to, and B, that you're the only one that's able to make your agent do what they want you to do. This week, there was a very popular open source product that is hitting all the news pages about the best personal assistant ever. And while it's potentially magical, if you're not understanding how everything actually works and you're not putting in the appropriate protections, you are opening up all of your personal data to be easily exposed by anybody who does understand and has a desire to do terrible things to people. And that's the issue with what this does, is because it's not so much that the Spark product that I built has the potential to do terrible things. It doesn't, because it's evaluating what you do, but it could lead you down a path to create things that aren't best practices. Because it can still hallucinate. It can still try and be helpful, because ultimately LLMs today, by definition, try and arrive at a positive outcome. And if I'm telling it, hey, create this documentation, and for some reason there's a problem with my credentials or there's a problem with the code, it's going to find some other way to come up with a solution, and it may just make stuff up. And so now, in our case, if we're trying to deliver a cost estimate or best practices to customers, and it's completely wrong, telling them it's going to cost $20,000 a month may impede their desire to want to use the product, when in reality, it's actually $10 a month. And so that's where you get into understanding what it's doing, how it's doing, is what it's creating realistic, accurate. And I think that's one of the big things. So that's kind of the lowlights of it. Really quick, the highlight is the amount of duplicative effort this process can actually eliminate inside of our environment, because we do development work, we do prototyping, security reviews. If if the engagement is something we want to open source and make available by AWS samples, for example, there's yet another review that requires all of the same artifacts. If you are going to go through our internal application security review because you want to write a blog, create a workshop, create some other construct, guess what? You have to create all those same artifacts. And so now, through this one process, you don't have to recreate it every single time. You upload the same thing, and Bob's your uncle, as they say.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose I should maybe take the script from this podcast and maybe run it through some sort of review. Just say, hey, maybe we can use something like Spark to say, hey, just make sure that we didn't say anything weird. Allison, is any of the work that you showed today or talked about today available to people that might listen to this?
So not
Is
today.
there a blog or a video or something that you want?
No, because literally I finished getting it working, and I would say 90% working, because while we've been talking, it's been running, and I just realized I didn't upload all the icons for the PowerPoint diagram generation. So that part failed. But we just got it done literally last night.
Nice.
But I have been talking with my leadership, and we are looking at ways in which this could be something that we could make available to customers. Right now, it's using some internal tools and solutions that other teams have built. But there are some openly available alternatives that we could implement into this framework, because it is something that I think is valuable for customers who want to, both from a security practice, accelerate and build repeatably good content, but also to developers who want to validate that they're building good quality deliverables within their existing practice. So, it's coming. We'll see, and maybe I'll come back on at a future Tech Bites so we can actually demonstrate the customer-facing version of the tool.
Yeah, Alza, I would love that. I think this is a fascinating topic. I love to hear the stories of people who are building these tools and they're doing it in varying domains and they're learning different things and having different perspective. And I really appreciate yours. So, hey, thanks for coming on and talking with me. I think that should do it for us.
Alrighty. Thank you very much, Todd. And we'll talk to you later.
Thanks for watching, and a very special thanks to our guests for joining. Hey, if you want to stay in the know on what specialists at AWS are doing, make sure you grab a Builder ID if you haven't already, and join our space on Builder Center, where we'll be posting almost all of our content exclusively. We'll also have show announcements on X, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and we'd love to hear what you think and what you're working on. Until then, I'm Farmer Todd, and I'll see you out in the field.